What, I ask you, is more dangerous to a man's soul than the illusion that power can be tamed by affection or secured through love? Love is fragile, it shifts with fortune, and men abandon it as easily as they betray their vows. Yet fear is constant, etched into the marrow of survival, unyielding to sentiment. Imagine a ruler who desires nothing from his subjects, not their praise, not their loyalty, not even their love. Such a man cannot be bought, cannot be softened, cannot be swayed, and it is there, in this cold detachment, that true terror begins. Would you dare to face him? Unpredictability is the blade no shield can withstand. A ruler who allows his enemies, or even his allies, to read his next move, has already surrendered a portion of his power. Men are creatures of habit. They hunger for patterns, for certainty, for the comfort of knowing how tomorrow will resemble today. In that hunger lies their weakness. When you deny them the map to your intentions, when your steps refuse to follow the rhythm they expect, you breed not courage but hesitation. And hesitation is the slow poison of every plot, the paralysis of every scheme. Consider the tyrant who is consistently cruel. His subjects may tremble, but they also learn. They adapt to his wrath, calculate his reach, and with time devise methods to endure or even resist. But a ruler who shifts like the storm, who one day offers favor and the next day strikes without pattern, makes resistance a gamble too costly to play. For against certainty men sharpen their blades. Against unpredictability they tremble, uncertain whether the very act of moving is the step that will destroy them. This is why unpredictability eclipses cruelty in the hierarchy of fear. Cruelty, once recognized, is measurable. It can be endured like a plague or calculated like a tax, but uncertainty, it is the shadow that stretches beyond imagination. It gnaws at the mind, robs men of sleep, and leaves them in a constant state of submission. For while they wonder what you will do next, they fail to act, and in their failure lies your victory. To wield this trait, one must master restraint as much as aggression. Show consistency only long enough for them to think they understand you, and then break that pattern with precision. Reward when they expect punishment, punish when they expect reward. Let them fear that no gesture, no oath, no act of loyalty guarantees their safety. In this way they will come to live not by their own will, but by your shadow. The more they try to predict, the more lost they will become in the labyrinth you weave. Unpredictability is not chaos. Chaos is the tool of the weak who lack control over themselves. True power lies in deliberate irregularity, the art of controlling appearances so that no man can claim knowledge of your soul. When they think you are merciful, you strike. When they think you are cruel, you pardon. Each act becomes a lesson that the ruler is not bound by expectation, not tethered by habit, not enslaved to the same chains that govern lesser men. And so, the most feared trait of power is not visible strength, nor open cruelty, but the silence before the storm, the riddle that cannot be solved. For men can brace themselves against what they know, but they cannot prepare for what they cannot predict. Silence is a language more terrible than words. Power that cloaks itself in mystery creates an atmosphere heavier than the loudest threats. Men fear not always what is said, but what remains unsaid, for the imagination paints horrors far darker than reality. When a ruler speaks sparingly, when his intentions are not laid bare before the court or the crowd, those around him live in a constant state of speculation. They ask themselves what he truly thinks, what punishment he contemplates, what favor he withholds, and in this guessing they lose the certainty upon which boldness depends. A man who constantly declares his will, who threatens, who explains his actions, may frighten his subjects in the moment, but soon he reveals his limits. Every word uttered becomes a chain that binds him, for promises can be measured and threats can be tested. But the ruler who remains silent, who allows no clear reading of his mind, forces his subjects into the prison of their own uncertainty. In the absence of clarity, they imagine the worst, and what they imagine is always more terrible than what is real. Even a smile can become menacing when it hides intent. Silence after betrayal is more dreadful than rage, for the offender does not know when or how the reckoning will come. Days pass, then weeks, and each moment of delay becomes its own punishment, eroding the courage of the guilty until they tremble at shadows. In this way, silence extends fear across time, making it not a single blow but a lingering specter. The mask of silence also preserves power from erosion. Words age quickly, promises grow stale, and threats fade when unfulfilled. But silence never expires. It remains as potent as the day it was chosen. To speak is to reduce infinite possibility into a single meaning, but to stay silent is to let all meanings remain alive in the minds of others. This is the essence of command, not in declaring but in withholding, yet silence must be wielded with discipline. To speak nothing at all is to risk appearing empty, but to speak little at the right moments is to transform each word into a decree carved in stone. Silence should not be mistaken for passivity, but rather the deliberate withholding of clarity until it becomes unbearable. In that unbearable weight lies submission. The most feared power, then, is not the shout of a tyrant, but the quiet ruler whose thoughts cannot be measured, whose motives remain hidden, and whose silence leaves every man wondering if his own steps lead him to ruin. Mercy, when given freely, is a drug that dulls fear and emboldens the very men it was meant to tame. People grow accustomed to kindness as they do to the rising of the sun, and once they expect it, they no longer see it as a gift, but as a right. And when men begin to believe they are entitled to mercy, they no longer fear the hand that grants it. Thus, true power does not lie in abundant generosity, but in the careful rationing of it, as if each act of clemency were a rare jewel, bestowed not out of sentiment, but out of calculation. A ruler who makes mercy a habit weakens himself, for his subjects soon discover that they may offend and yet escape the weight of consequence. Every pardon then feeds the belief that punishment is hollow, that justice may be bent, and that authority can be softened. But when mercy is scarce, when it is offered like water in a desert, men do not grow entitled to it. They marvel at it. They see it not as weakness, but as an unpredictable favor, one that they dare not count on. In this way, mercy becomes more terrible than cruelty, because it carries uncertainty. To use mercy as a tool of fear, one must wield it sparingly and without warmth. A pardon must feel like a calculated move, not a sign of compassion. It should carry the weight of implication, that it could have been otherwise, that destruction was within your grasp, and that the spared man lives only by your indulgence. Let him taste survival not as a relief, but as a debt that binds him in loyalty mixed with dread. For when men believe their lives are held on the edge of a knife, they do not mistake mercy for kindness. They see it as power. The danger lies in rulers who wish to be loved more than feared. They distribute mercy like coin, thinking it will purchase loyalty. But loyalty gained through generosity is fickle, for men love as long as they profit, and abandon as soon as they are denied. Fear, however, does not rely on gratitude. It roots itself in the instinct of survival, which no man can discard. Thus, mercy must serve fear, never replace it. The highest form of authority is not to grant life as a benevolent gift, but to withhold death until it serves your design. by making men uncertain whether they will face the sword or the pardon. You keep them suspended in obedience. Mercy, when rare, becomes sharper than punishment, for its scarcity reminds all that it flows not from the goodness of your heart, but from the cold calculation of your will. And so, the ruler most feared is not the one who refuses mercy altogether, but the one who grants it so seldom, and with such deliberate precision, that men tremble even in their gratitude. Sentiment has no place where survival is at stake. Men often clothe power in illusions of virtue, hoping to persuade themselves that rulers can govern with tenderness, that justice can be soft, and that compassion can guide the affairs of states. But those who cling to such illusions are destroyed by them. The trait that makes power most feared is its cold indifference to sentiment, its capacity to act not as the heart desires, but as necessity commands. In the realm of survival, there is no higher law than necessity, and when cruelty becomes necessary, it is not a crime, it is an obligation. Men are quick to condemn ruthlessness, yet they kneel before it when it secures their safety. They whisper that cruelty is barbaric, even as they sleep peacefully beneath its shadow. What they despise in words, they respect in silence, for the world does not reward intentions, it rewards outcomes. A ruler who hesitates out of pity, who spares when severity is demanded, sacrifices the stability of all for the comfort of a few. Such hesitation is weakness, and weakness is always punished more harshly than cruelty. Cold logic sees what sentiment cannot. It calculates that the death of a few may preserve the lives of thousands, that swift terror may prevent endless rebellion, that the harshest punishment today may prevent greater bloodshed tomorrow. Those who cling to mercy in moments where severity is demanded imagine themselves humane, but in truth they are architects of greater suffering. Fear of this logic is what makes power dreadful, the recognition that it will not waver, that it will choose the knife when the knife is required, and that no plea, no tear, no appeal to the heart will alter its course. This indifference creates a terror that cruelty alone cannot. For cruelty may be predicted, it may even be endured, but when men realize that sentiment has no sway over the hand that rules, they understand that nothing can protect them. No bond, no plea, no display of loyalty. What shields most men from harm in their daily lives is the expectation of compassion in others. Strip that expectation away, and you strip them of their last defense. The ruler who embraces necessity does not delight in cruelty, but neither does he shrink from it. His power lies not in the act itself, but in the certainty that he will do what must be done, no matter how severe. That certainty chills the heart more than the blow itself. It tells all who serve him that they live not under the warmth of his favor, but beneath the cold, unfeeling hand of necessity. And so, the most feared trait of power is not rage nor cruelty, but the unflinching obedience to necessity itself. Justice that can be predicted is justice that can be resisted. When men know the measure of their punishment, they will test its limits, weighing crime against consequence, boldness against risk. But when retribution falls without pattern, when punishment is sudden, harsh, and disproportionate, fear becomes absolute. The mind cannot scheme in the face of uncertainty. Every action, no matter how small, feels like a gamble with ruin, and in such an atmosphere, obedience takes root not from loyalty, but from dread. It is not the visible execution that terrifies most, but the unpredictability of it. A thief who knows his hand will be cut may still steal if he judges the prize worth the loss. But a thief who does not know whether he will lose his hand, his life, or his entire family, will think not once but 100 times before daring to act. Certainty breeds calculation. Uncertainty breeds paralysis. The ruler who punishes without warning strips men of the confidence to weigh their options, for they do not know which step, which word, which gesture might unleash destruction. Some rulers rely on laws carefully written, with clear consequences. Yet the very clarity of law grants men courage, for they can test its edges. They can maneuver within its boundaries, exploit its gaps, and manipulate its consistency. But when the ruler himself becomes the law, when his punishment is swift and not bound by any written measure, then law itself transforms into terror. It is no longer a system to be studied, but a force to be endured. Disproportion in punishment is a weapon sharper than cruelty. To punish lightly when severity is expected teaches men to tremble even in reprieve, for they never know when leniency will give way to wrath. To punish severely for a minor offense teaches the lesson that every offense, no matter how small, carries the shadow of destruction. In both cases, men cannot predict, and what cannot be predicted cannot be prepared for. This uncertainty spreads through a society like smoke. It enters homes, whispers in taverns, and lodges in the minds of courtiers and generals alike. No man feels secure, for he cannot anchor his safety in law, in precedent, or in favor. They live instead in the awareness that the ruler's judgment falls like lightning, sudden, arbitrary, and devastating. Such awareness forces obedience more effectively than any decree, for men would rather endure silent submission than risk awakening wrath they cannot measure. And so, the trait most feared is not cruelty itself, but the ruler's refusal to bind cruelty within expectation. For when punishment comes without warning, men live not by their own will, but by constant fear of the unknown moment that may end them. The ruler who is free from the need for love holds the most terrible form of power. Men by their nature seek affection and approval, and they assume that others, even those above them, hunger for the same. It is this assumption that makes them bold, for they believe loyalty, flattery, or devotion can soften authority, that the ruler's heart can be persuaded, seduced, or bribed. But when they discover that he does not crave their love, nor even their admiration, they are struck by a fear far deeper than cruelty could inspire. For they face a master who cannot be reached through the strings that bind ordinary men. Love creates dependency. A ruler who longs to be loved bends himself, however slightly, to the expectations of others. He distributes favors to win devotion. He pardons to earn gratitude. He speaks softly to maintain affection. But each of these concessions weakens him, for in seeking to be loved, he allows himself to be governed by those whose loyalty is as fickle as the wind. A people may cheer today and curse tomorrow, their affection shifting with their fortune. To need their love is to be chained to their moods. The ruler who detaches himself from such weakness becomes an enigma. His subjects cannot understand him, for he does not respond to their gestures of loyalty with warmth, nor to their cries for mercy with sentiment. Their affection becomes meaningless, their flattery useless, their attempts at manipulation wasted. They are left with only one certainty, that nothing they do can bend his will, and in this certainty lies despair, for men fear most what they cannot influence. Such detachment does not mean cruelty for cruelty's sake, nor does it mean disdain for loyalty. It means rising above the need for it, wielding it only as a tool, never as a necessity. When devotion comes, it is not accepted as a master accepts tribute, but as a merchant accepts coin, a transaction of utility, not affection. Those who follow him know that their loyalty secures not his gratitude, but only their survival. Those who betray him know that no past love, no plea for understanding will shield them. In this way, obedience is no longer a choice born of admiration, but a necessity born of fear. A ruler untouched by affection commands a unique reverence. He becomes like stone, cold, immovable, and beyond appeal. Men may serve him, but they never mistake his rule for partnership. They understand it as domination. And though they may whisper against him in secret, in their hearts they know he cannot be seduced, bribed, or softened, and so their whispers remain only whispers. Thus, the most feared trait of power is not cruelty, nor even violence, but freedom from the need to be loved. For the man who needs nothing from his subjects holds everything over them.